Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much. You can be seated. All right. I hope everyone has had a pleasant week and a pleasant weekend. We've got the work week started, and we're moving forward and continue our continuation of the building of our positive character. And welcome to those who are here local and those who are watching us continue. You know, we have a lot of faithful students online that are joining us on Facebook, and also potentially even some new people who might be watching us for the first time. This is a Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification class, and we are going in this class to help you, to each and every one of us, to develop the skills necessary to not only practice the peaceful solution, but to also be able to teach it to others, whether that's in a classroom environment, a presentation type setting, or whatever the case might be. You know, every single one of us has the opportunity to teach when we're interacting with other people, and we want to make sure that we take advantage of that opportunity to set a positive example. So don't necessarily think, you know, that you have to be in a classroom setting to be an example of peace, to be a teacher of peace. You can look at every single opportunity or circumstance or environment that you are in as a way to do that. So in case you're just joining us, we're continuing in the respect unit, and this is unit number 4 of the intermediate series, and we are in chapter 2, and we covered chapter 1, which is respect, or the value of respect, which in that chapter, as they all do, they lay the foundation of what the prime goal of the book is. In this case, it is respect. So understanding the value of respect, what respect is, how we display it to ourselves. These are some of the things that we're going to be covering in this unit here. How we can show it to others, how we can develop a respectful reputation, how we respond to disrespect, respect for the environment, and so forth. So there's a lot in here when it comes to respect, but again, it would be difficult to fully understand or grasp this concept if we had not have laid the groundwork with the first 3 units. And that's why, as we teach and it's given in the preface and the introduction of every unit, to make sure that these lessons are done in order, okay? Because if you miss something, then your students are actually going to be lacking. They're going to be lacking a very essential key to the puzzle to help them to fully build a positive character. And all these concepts that we're going over, the character traits and how to apply them, the thought patterns and the things that we need to look out for, you know, they all work, like David said, you know, they work synergistically together, right? It's like it's kind of like gears that have to intertwine and cog and mesh with each other. They have to be perfectly aligned. And if you have just, you know, like one gear missing, then you're going to be jumping. I don't know if you've ever ridden a bike before and you have a little tooth or something on your sprocket or your gear missing. You know, your chain jumps. You know, your pedals jump when you're riding down the road, especially when you're giving it that torque, you know, and taking off or merging into traffic or something like that. You know, it can put you in a bad situation if you just have one thing missing. Well, it's the same thing with these concepts that we're presenting in here. We have to go, and this is why we go back, right? This is why we continuously go back and rehearse and bring things back up to the surface and then tie them into the current lesson, because we don't want any of those cogs or gears or sprockets or whatever to be missing in the minds of our students as we move forward, because they all help everything to tie together. Like I always mention, you know, the building blocks to developing a positive character. Well, you take the one block out of the bottom, you make the whole set unstable. And all it would take is some minor infraction to cause the whole thing to stumble. But when you've got a strong foundation, then you can handle a lot more pressure. And we guarantee you, you know, as teachers, excuse me, as teachers, and this is something that you don't want to scare your students, but you want to be realistic. You want to be realistic in them understanding that the more we learn about this, the development of a positive character, the more we're going to see and recognize negative character traits, immorality in society around us, in our peers, possibly even in our friends or associates, or maybe even in family members who have not been learning the peaceful solution. But at the same time, it's also going to cause us to some degree, stick out kind of like sore thumbs, because we are taking the road less traveled, right? We are not following the crowd in the decisions that we make and how we interact and behave and so forth on a daily basis. No, we're, for lack of better words, we're taking a higher road, right? A more morally high road or ethical road as we interact with each other, because at the end of the day, we not only affect ourselves in the decisions that we make, but we affect those who we interact with. Excuse me, I got a little tickle in my throat. So just keep these things in mind as we move forward, because we're going to be picking up. We're just kind of at the beginning part here of this chapter 2. And we're talking about thoughts. But before we get into that, I just want to go back a little bit here and just kind of summarize a little bit of what we've covered up to this point, because this chapter here is dealing with respect for ourselves, right? It's entitled Respect for Myself, because as we read it, we're reading it to ourselves, but as teachers, we're teaching it not only to our students, but as we teach, we're learning as well. Okay, so this is talking about respect for ourselves and how we can understand. Now, we went over chapter 1 and we understand what respect is, right? We understand how respect can be shown, and it's not enough just to understand that respect has to be shown to people and their possessions, but it's important as well for us to understand that, hey, as individuals, we need to show ourselves respect as well, right? As the golden rule goes, treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, if you don't have much respect for yourself, you're probably not going to have that much respect for other people, okay? And then sometimes you have people who allow themselves to be taken advantage of, right? They might have very positive character traits, like they're kind and they're patient and so forth, but they allow themselves because they want to fit in, they want to be accepted, they want to have friends, they don't want to be the last person standing on the sideline or whatever. They'll allow themselves to be influenced to make poor choices, right? And whether they realize that or not, that's a lack of respect for themselves, to allow yourself to be influenced to make poor choices just to be accepted, just to have a quote unquote friend, right? A true friend would never encourage you to do anything that would bring harm to yourself, or that would be basically in the category of immorality. But sometimes people take advantage of that, right? They see that people have a desire to be accepted. They see that people have a desire to fit in, and they'll kind of use that to manipulate that person to do what they want them to do. Well, if you want to be a part of our group, or if you want to be my friend, then you'll do this, then you'll do that. As we read in one of the examples, they tried to encourage the young lady to watch out for him while she stole some things from the store, right? Because they knew that she wanted to be a part of that friend group. They knew that, and they took advantage of her in that regard. So respect for ourselves is very important. Like David covered last time, this does not mean, that a person's conceited, right? Now, some people are conceited. They actually are very conceited, and they think more highly of themselves than they ought to, but they don't even realize that in that regards, they're even lacking the positive character trait of humility, okay? There's nothing wrong with wanting the best for yourself, wanting to become the best version of yourself, as they say, or wanting to learn as much as you can, or even wanting to be the best in your class, the best at what you strive to do, and a lot of people have that mindset. A lot of students have that mindset. They kind of have a kind of competitive nature, but it's not necessarily always competing with others. It's usually them competing with their own selves to be better than they were the previous year or the previous semester, or to improve from the previous test. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve yourself and make yourself more valuable in regards to the amount of knowledge that you have and what you can do with it. But again, if you don't couple those things with these positive character traits, all that great knowledge and all that great value can actually lead a person to making poor choices, to lead a person to bringing harm to themselves and others, because you have to have those checks and balances in place. And having these positive character, moral character, firmly rooted within a person's heart, it gives them that direction on how to use the knowledge that they've obtained in a way that brings benefit and not harm. So that's why we've got to take this big ball, so to speak, and include it in every, it might seem a little bit daunting at times, but the more we study and we practice these things, we can include these concepts, these traits, these lessons into every decision that we make. And of course, everybody here, most of us here, in working and doing things over a long period of time, and I've mentioned it before, it might seem like a lot of different steps, right? And I use the example of learning how to drive a car. You have to have keys. Well, nowadays you don't really have to have keys, but generally speaking, you have to have a key. You have to know where to put the key. You have to know how to turn the vehicle on. You have to check your mirrors and adjust them to make sure they're properly. If it wasn't the vehicle that you were driving, adjust your steering wheel, your seat, and then you have to, there's a lot of different steps before you even get on the road. Well, it seems like a lot at first, but the more you learn it, the more you practice it, everything just becomes second nature. You're talking on your Bluetooth and you're putting your things in there, throwing it in the back, and the next thing you know, you're throwing it in reverse, and off you go down the road, right? And you don't even know how you got from point A to point B, because you're, it's such a pattern that you don't even really have to think about it. Consciously, you don't really have to think about it, and that's when your subconscious mind starts taking the cues and the continual placement of certain habitual thought patterns over and over and over and over again, and they make it a part of you. Well, it's the same with practicing these positive character traits, right? It becomes our first nature instead of our second nature. It becomes the very thing through which we make our decisions on, right? The very thing through which we examine an influence that's coming towards us, or words that might be said to us, or a situation that we might be faced with. We're going to stop and think about, well, what is the best steps? What are the best steps for me to take in order to bring about a peaceful solution in this situation? If that's our goal in everything and we stick to it, we'll be successful. But in this chapter here, just to kind of give a little brief summary, we're talking about respect for myself, which is the title of the chapter. And we talk a little bit about having respect and how it will enable us to handle life's challenges in a positive way and avoid making choices that could have a negative impact on your life. Sometimes people make impulsive choices. They don't think about things. They don't think things through and think of the consequences that could come about because they make a decision, sometimes not even having the facts, right? Not having all the facts, or not making sure the facts are correct. They might have some facts, they might have some information, but sometimes that stuff could be hearsay. And they make a decision based on that, and it turns out to be the wrong decision. And some of these things can impact a person for the rest of their life, the opportunities that they have and so forth, sometimes even things that are health related. We talked about self-respect includes controlling your thoughts, feelings, and actions. Now, if you see, this is a theme that we have carried on from the very first unit: thoughts, feelings, actions. Because the demonstration or the evidence of positive character is shown through our behavior. And as we know now, our behavior is the result primarily of our thoughts, okay? If we value positive character traits, then we're going to do things to feed ourselves with knowledge, information, that will in turn feed our thoughts, which will in turn direct our emotions in a way that don't lead to poor choices, right? Or at least be able to bring our are emotions under subjection. Because just because you have a negative emotion, just because you're involved in a conflict and as a result of embarrassment or frustration or fear you become angry, it doesn't mean that that negative emotion has to lead to negative behavior. It's just something that's there. And as a person who's educated in these things there, we're able to recognize, okay, yes, I'm getting upset right now at this situation. This is why I'm upset, but this is the course of action that I need to take. And then that comes forth in your behavior. And sometimes that can occur with just in a matter of a few seconds. Sometimes it can occur in a split second. The more we've trained ourselves, the faster it occurs. But the more we do this, our actions will eventually always become positive, always become respectful, always demonstrate self-control. We covered how your self-respect can clearly be seen in your actions. Now, not just self-control or just respect, but your self-respect, right? How they can actually be clearly seen in your actions, the way you conduct yourself, the way you carry yourself, as it's also said. And even as we'll get into the way you dress. These things, as we covered in the previous books, these things actually can send signals to other people about the way you perceive yourself in the environment around you, or how you want the environment around you to perceive you, right? To see you. You want to be respected? Do you want to present yourself as someone who has a great deal of respect, care, and concern for themselves, who has set goals for themselves and are working hard to achieve those positive goals, or just somebody who just doesn't care? They're just floating through life like a piece of dust in the wind, and wherever life will take them, there I will go. Well, people like that, of course they need to be educated, but people like that, they a lot of times end up in pretty bad situations, right? Or they're always getting out of a bad situation. They're trying to step on the brakes because they're in the process of getting ready to get into a bad situation. So, yeah, we do have some control over our lives. We do have some control over the way we present ourselves, okay? and that, we have full control over the way we present ourselves because that comes from within. We also covered how that a person could be prone to making choices that can have negative consequences if they don't have self-respect. The desire to fit in can be accepted without character. The character trait of self-respect can cause you to negatively conform to peer pressure, which, as we've read in Unit 2 and Unit 3, how these things actually, 1, 2, and 3, how these things can actually bring a person to conforming to negatively. Remember that desire to fit in. If that desire to fit in is greater than your sense of morality, right, your respect for yourself or positive goals for yourself, then you can be led to engage in negative activities. Conformity and peer pressure can be both positive and negative, but without understanding the importance of self-respect and practicing it in your life, you could be influenced to make choices that could jeopardize your health and safety. And I'm telling you, and it's your health, your safety, but especially your health, because some things you can do to change your safety. You can, kind of go to a different location that's a little more safe than the other, location, or you can go in your room, your house, and lock the doors and close the windows and then put on the alarm system, and you have a little bit of sense of safety. But, it's not so easy when it comes to health. Sometimes when we get to a certain point in our health because of decisions that have been made, and we reach a point where our bodies are not able to keep up with the consequences of those negative decisions, they say you don't miss the water till the well runs dry, right? We don't miss a lot of these things that we take for granted until they're not there, or they're not there as in abundance as they used to be. Things from joints and, issues with the mind, the liver, different organs, the heart, and so forth. Some of these things might, possibly be because of injuries. Some things are even because of genetics. But in a lot of cases, it's just because people have abused their bodies. They've made choices to bring abuse to their bodies, and some of these things we covered in the risk-taking behaviors with, the premarital sex and the abuse of alcohol, the abuse of the use of illegal drugs, the abuse of legal drugs or prescriptions, things of that nature. People do these things, and everything comes with some type of a consequence, right? And if you pile these things up, eventually, the body is pretty resilient, but it can only take so much for so long of a period of time. Those negative influences can lead to risky behaviors such as those found on page 29, which are some of the things that we covered a little bit earlier here. Let me see if I wanted to go back here. Oh, yeah. That's page 29 there. If you look at page 29 under just the facts, you see some of these risk-taking behaviors. They include alcohol or the abusing of alcohol, the use of marijuana, ecstasy, which is an amphetamine, inhalants such as vapors of glue, gasoline, hairspray, and paint thinner, which destroy the fatty tissues protecting the nerve cells in the brain. And it's interesting because I was watching some information on the brain and the nerve cells and the neurons and so forth, and we won't look at that today, but a lot of the neuroscientists are finding, in these latter studies, and it's not new like in the last year or so, it's been known for a while, that our brains they're plastic, right? Not like they're made out of plastic, but they're moldable. They can actually grow and shrink depending on the amount of knowledge that you feed it, the amount of new neural connections that are made because you're educating yourself, because you're forming new pathways, right? And as a result, the brain has to form new neurons and connections, and they've got something called, I think we're going to look at it in one of the videos a little bit later, telomeres, and which that talks about the age of a cell. But in your brain, the microtubules and things like that, there's switches that turn things on, and and all these different connections. Your brain actually, like we've covered, like a muscle, can get bigger and stronger. Not necessarily that it gets so fat, you gotta wear bigger hats or anything like that, but it actually becomes stronger the more we use it, okay? And that's the thing that's pretty fearful now, because we have so many devices in society right now that our brains are becoming less and less necessary. And so people have, the world is almost becoming completely automated. You don't have to add anything. You don't have to look up a telephone number. You don't even have to drive your car. Every now and then you see the news, they come on, and there's somebody who was recording somebody while they're driving down the highway, and the driver of the car was asleep because it was in, autopilot mode or whatever, right? Everything has become so automated that the human element is being taken essentially out of living. And we've seen this over the last, 50 to 80, 90 years, as this technology has really been on an uphill swing. It's all done to make life easier. And there are some things that do make life easier, but, as humans, we need to work. Our muscles need to work. You've seen when astronauts go and they spend a long period of time in space. One of the things that they have to deal with is muscle loss. They have to continuously exercise because they deal with muscle loss and they deal with bone loss, osteoporosis that actually can set in because of a lack of gravity in space. And their muscles aren't really working. They're not doing the things. Just walking is working. Sitting up straight is working. Your muscles, there's a lot of muscles that it's required for you to sit up straight. Okay? Even in keeping your face straight, they say keep a straight face. And it's hard when people tell you to keep a straight face. It becomes even harder to keep a straight face. Do not laugh, right? There's a lot of muscles that's involved. If you've ever seen or experienced, a person who's had, like facial paralysis or a stroke or something like that, a lot of times the muscles will droop because they're not, they're not, the electrical impulses aren't getting there to tighten those muscles to keep them in the position that they need to be. So So, if we don't work our brains in the same way, then eventually they begin to atrophy. Our brains begin to get weaker, and then it becomes oh, uh, what was that? What was that? What's my name again? I can't remember my name. You know, and I'm not just talking about dementia or anything, but it just becomes harder and harder to remember things because we're not using our minds the way that they were designed to be used. So keep those things in mind, and anytime you find the opportunity to actually read a book, read information, read about something that can improve your mind instead of just watching a video, right? You can actually strengthen your mind. The same thing with writing, taking the opportunity to actually use your hand to write something down. It strengthens portions of the brain, particularly the part that deals with creativity and imagination and so forth, which has been on a continual decline even in our children in schools. So it says here, premarital sex is also one of the negative risk-taking behaviors. And lastly, it shows here how under Did You Know, it says, did you know that you could acquire sexually transmitted diseases or STDs by having sex just one time with someone who is infected? People with an STD still look healthy and normal, but, or not but, you wouldn't know whether the person was infected until you became infected. By that time, it will be too late. Some of these diseases can cause health problems for the rest of your life. And so that's some of those choices that we make that can actually jeopardize our health and safety. We talked a little bit about being afraid of negative peer pressure. There's no reason to avoid, of course, that's no reason to avoid making friends. We just have to educate ourselves on what a real friend is as opposed to just, picking somebody as a friend. Page 30 talks about that. And I like that information there in it's about the second paragraph there, right next to the boy hanging onto the tree. Actually, positive character branches pointing right at it. It says, a real friend will encourage you to respect your mind and body by not smoking, abusing drugs and alcohol, or engaging in premarital sex. A real friend will warn you of the risk of sexually transmitted diseases and the consequences of unwanted pregnancy. Do not put aside your self-respect and other positive character traits in order to fit in with the crowd. And lastly, it says, make every effort to develop the positive character trait of self-respect. Hang on to it as if your life depended on it. The truth is, it does. All right, and that sums up kind of what, to some degree in this book, what a real friend is or what a true friend is. Remember, they'll encourage you to develop and maintain your positive character and never try to influence you or get you and tug on you and poke and prod at you to do something that you're not comfortable with or to do something that could jeopardize your health and safety. What did we learn? No is okay. Say no and mean it. You don't always have to give an explanation for the reason why you don't want to do something when it comes to people trying to get you to do immoral things. All right. So it says here, understanding these concepts will help us better evaluate ourselves and appreciate who we are as unique individuals. Learning about respect and how it applies to us to develop a positive part. Learning about respect and how it applies to us to develop it as a part of our positive character is also some of the things we covered as well, previous teachers. As we set high standards for ourselves by standing up for what's positive and morally correct, we actually increase our self-worth. We also demonstrate self-respect by being humble and seeking ways to improve ourselves. And one way of improving ourselves is to be aware of our thoughts and the type of self-talk that we engage in, because as we learned in the previous 3 units, thoughts lead to feelings and feelings lead to actions that produce either consequences or rewards based on whatever it is, whatever decision that we make. So let's look at the first here. Let's go back to lesson plan 2D, and we're going to look at procedure 7. It says, tell students that another important aspect of developing self-respect involves controlling their self-talk or what they say to themselves and about themselves. Have students read the sections entitled A Penny for Your Thoughts and optimism, pessimism, and your thoughts on page 33 through 34 of their handbooks. Stress that negative thoughts can ultimately affect their choices and actions. Okay, and so again, we're not wanting to really focus on that, but we want them to be aware of the dangers of negative thought patterns, because it kind of seems like it's kind of a normal thing to go towards the negative thoughts, right? Somebody says, hey, you know, I really need to talk to you. Oh, man, I knew it, I'm fired, right? I'm fired. Yeah. No, I was just going to see if you want to go catch some lunch, you know, later, or, you know, get some lunch. Well, catch lunch, I guess you're hunting for a deer or something, but, you know, get some lunch later, or, go fishing or something like that. Sometimes people, and I think we've possibly even ourselves, have been around people who it seems like everything is negative, right? It's hard for them to see the bright side of things. It's hard for them to see that there can be any benefit in any situation. And I personally, I always try to be optimistic. And it can sometimes be frustrating when somebody's so pessimistic that I have to control my thoughts so I do not become pessimistic in my thoughts regarding that person's pessimism, right? I have to be very careful, because for myself, and I can only speak for myself, it just seems more of a brighter thing to look at the best possible outcome. There's always going to be some worst possible outcome that can be, in a situation. But as teachers of the peaceful solution and positive thinkers, we should always be thinking of the best possible outcome, especially if we have a part in it. Because if we have a part in it, then the outcome should definitely be a positive one, not a negative one, right? We shouldn't be responding to disrespect with more disrespect. You see, so to some degree, we can influence the outcome of a situation by the choices that we make. All right. So if we look back to page 33, or forward to page 33 here, I just want to go back over this here, a penny for your thoughts, as we move into this optimism, pessimism, and your thoughts here. It says another aspect, just reading real quick, of developing self-respect is to be aware of your thoughts. What have you been thinking lately? Are they positive thoughts that help build and maintain your positive character, or are they negative thoughts that make you feel bad about yourself? Whether you realize it or not, you are always talking to yourself. Thoughts run in and out of our minds constantly, and this process is called self-talk. And contrary to popular belief, it is not just crazy people who talk to themselves, or who might be deemed crazy. That's usually a matter of opinion. People who are perfectly sane talk to themselves all the time. All right, and if you look back here, or if you have your notes, go back here really quick to page 40 in the character unit, because part of what our self-talk affects is also our self-concept, okay? And if a person, and this we're going to go back here and remind ourselves as teachers, if a person does not have a healthy self-concept, they're going to be more subject to negative self-talk, right? If they have a negative self-concept, they're going to be subject to more negative self-talk. And you know what? As a result of that, they're going to increase the negative self-concept that they have. So it becomes kind of like a downward spiral that they go into. The only way to change it is to change the way you think, right? Change the way you speak to yourself, and change the way you see yourself. Now this is the effects of character within the family in chapter 2 here, in the character unit. And on the top of page 40 here, it talks about homes, because this is where we can see where a lot of these things start. The process of this self-concept that could lead to negative self-talk actually starts in the home a lot of cases. Not every case, but in a lot of cases. It says, when someone grows up in a home where there is physical, sexual abuse, their self-concept and character development will be affected. Self-concept is the way you see yourself. And it is very important to have a positive self-concept of who you are, because people with a negative self-concept tend to be sad, depressed, angry, and resentful. These emotions can lead to negative character traits such as being hateful, aggressive, and revengeful. These negative character traits often result in violent behaviors. Okay, so we can see that that self-concept can actually be a part. It's like negative self-concept and negative self-talk, they actually feed each other, right? And as teachers, it helps us to be able to kind of read our students. We might not have every detail about their lives, but to some degree, we can, understanding the behavior, we can kind of narrow down some of the causes, right? Like I said, you're not going to know everything, and your job is not to be a psychologist, but we understand that certain things, certain experiences, teachings, and so forth, influences lead to certain behaviors. In the self-control unit on page 12, it says, this is under be your own best critic, not your worst critic. And that's on page 12, chapter 1. It says, have you ever heard the saying, you're your own worst critic? Well, most of us are, and we can really put ourselves down, especially when we act in a way that is disappointing. Although it is okay to be disappointed with our actions, when we know we could have made better choices, it is not okay to continually belittle our worth as human beings. If you become disappointed with yourself, well, examine the thoughts and the feelings that led you to act in a certain way. How do you examine the thoughts and the feelings? What do you weigh them out with? What do you compare them with? Well, we have to go back and be educated. You know, the person has to go back and have the tools and the resources. It's like, does this weigh a pound or does this weigh 2 pounds? Well, you've got to have a scale to measure it, right? And that's what you get with the peaceful solution. It's your scale to measure if something's positive or negative, if it's right or wrong, if it's moral or if it's immoral. Focus on those things, or then focus your thoughts on what you need to change in order to make better choices. Don't just sit there and wallow in it, you know, and wallow in the mire, so to speak. But focus on what you need to do to change, to turn the situation around, to get out of the mud, so to speak. Thoughts like I'm so stupid, I can't do anything right, or it doesn't matter what choice I make, I'm always wrong, are self-defeating. And this is a part of this pessimism, or these pessimistic thoughts, or this pessimistic self-talk that we're going to be talking about here. They will not help you to change or improve. The danger of thinking negatively about yourself is that after a while, you begin to believe it. If you believe that you can't do anything right, then you will put forth no effort in making right decisions. You will continue to repeat the same behavior, the same negative behavior. All right, and that's very true. If you tell a person, well, hey, we're probably not gonna get this done today, you know, but I want you to at least work until 5 o'clock or 5:30, and the person has that thought, well, I'm not going to get it done, so there's really no need to put any effort in it, right? They're not going to really strive to do their best to get it done. Now, that's not with everybody. Some people will say, oh, yeah, I'm going to try to get it done, you know? they're not that they want to prove their boss wrong, but they want to actually, they look at it as a challenge to try to do something, to accomplish something more that might even set the company or the job ahead for the next day. Some people look at things as a positive challenge, and some people look at things as an excuse to be lazy. It all depends on the individual. People who get into the habit of thinking negatively about themselves are more likely, notice here, to get talked into experimenting with risk-taking behaviors, such as the ones we've already covered, premarital sex, drugs, and crime. They tend to have an I have nothing to live for, so I might as well do whatever attitude. And so, lastly, it says, self-control is learning to control the way you think about yourself. By examining or critiquing your behavior for the purpose of improving yourself, you are practicing self-control. On the other hand, when you persist, now notice this is a persistent or a continued pattern of thinking, and thinking about yourself in a negative way, and make no attempt to change your behavior, you are not practicing self-control. And that can go with a lot of different things. It's like the person who makes the, as Chris mentioned, people make these goals. They set these goals at the beginning of the year, and they say, yeah, I'm gonna lose 20 pounds, lose 20 pounds by the summertime, so I can, fit into my whatever, And they talk about it. Yeah, man, hey, I'm gonna lose 20 pounds. I'm gonna get me one of those workout sets, and I'm gonna start working. How's that coming? Yeah, I'm getting ready to start, eating healthier and more salads and everything, and changing my eating behavior. 6 months later, so how's that going? I'm getting ready to. I'm really thinking about it. I got, it's already half a year. I might as well set it for next year, It's the pessimist, not pessimist, the procrastinator always says, they're getting ready to start something new first thing in the morning. And that, that is a lack of self-control, right? That's not practicing self-control. Well, we need this self-control, and it also translates into what we're covering here in regards to having respect for ourselves and the way we talk to ourselves and so forth. Let's see, it says negative thoughts will lead to negative self-talk or self-criticism, which we just talked about here on page 12 in the self-control unit. We process our feelings within our minds. And the mind is more than just what's up here, it's also in your heart. For instance, what do you say to yourself when you make a mistake and you feel terrible about it? Do you call yourself stupid? Do you say, I can't do anything right? Well, the problem with negative self-talk is that after a while we begin to believe what we tell ourselves. What did we just cover here? The self-control. You see all these things tie together? Since thoughts lead to actions, negative self-talk can lead to, of course, negative actions. Negative self-talk can leave you vulnerable to the influences that lead to risky behavior. Whether or not you recognize your own value determines much of your self-worth. All right, so let's look over to page 34 there, because we and what David covered in the previous class and understanding about our thoughts, we're getting into optimism, pessimism, and your thoughts here. It says here on the page 34, optimism, pessimism, and your thoughts. Although thinking positively is important to how you treat yourself and others, many people must learn how to be optimistic, positive thinkers, right? Because it's not necessarily something that comes naturally. Seems like it kind of starts off that way when we're children, and then we get slammed right into life. And the environments around us, it's filled with a lot of negativity. And so the innocence and the optimism of our youth, and of course your environment plays a lot in that. Like if a parent was to tell a child, hey, you can accomplish anything that you want to accomplish, right? You just have to learn, those particular, that particular knowledge in order to do it, and then, put forth the effort to do the very best you can. Well, they're going to have kind of more of an optimistic way of thinking about setting and achieving goals. On the other hand, if a parent's always telling the child after they express their goals and their desires, you'll never do that. You're going to be just like your old man, Or, oh, yeah, no, that's never going to, that's, our family's never accomplished anything like that. Eventually, the child's going to probably start to believe it, right? And it becomes to this point of, well, why should I put any effort in doing it anyway, right? Pops and granddad, they never accomplished anything, so I might as well just keep it in the family. And that becomes a rut that people can get in that regards too. This word optimism here, if you look up the etymology of the word optimism, it simply means to work or to produce in abundance, and that's the root word op of the optimism, to work or to produce in abundance. And you've probably seen that in like copies or cooperation and so forth, or operate, right? It says here also, it says doing great work. Opus is a labor, a work, or exertion. To start work, to practice, to honor, to exercise, to practice. It also means to perform or power. Now, when we're talking about optimism, or it actually goes back to the word optimum, it means the best possible environment for work to get done, or for the energy or the efforts or the exercise that's being performed to be successful. So when a person is optimistic, it doesn't mean that they're, sometimes people look at optimistic people as naive, right? Oh man, everything will work out. We just have to stay focused on the things we've learned in the peaceful solution and move forward and putting those things into practice. Man, you're naive. Yeah, you don't know anything about life. You've been at home all the time. You've been having your heads in those books reading, y'all. You need to get out here where all the real stuff is taking place. Well, naivety is showing a lack of experience, wisdom, or judgment. Well, it's interesting because as we learn the peaceful solution, it actually makes us better judges. It actually makes us better able to weigh out decisions and make sound moral decisions. So think about that in regards to optimism, because that's what we're striving for. It says being optimistic is a positive character trait that will enable you to expect the best possible outcome from a situation. Optimistic people are hopeful and encouraging to themselves and others. So being optimistic is a positive character trait. Optimism is a positive emotion, right? A positive emotion. That is what optimism is. Just like pessimism is a negative emotion. But when a person is optimistic, they display these positive emotions, okay? So you kind of see the behaviors and the characters and how they relate to each other and how they go hand in hand. It's interesting because optimism has kind of transcended into even the scientific world. How many of you have heard of the term placebo, or the placebo effect? Right? It looks like placebo, right? But it's actually spelled or pronounced placebo, Placebo. And this is actually from this article here. Just want to make sure. Yeah, this is from health.harvard.edu. And they talk about the power of the placebo effect. It says, treating yourself with your mind is possible, but there is more to the placebo effect than positive thinking. Your mind can be a powerful healing tool when given the chance, and the idea that your brain can convince your body a fake treatment is the real thing, the so-called placebo effect, and thus stimulate healing has been around for millennia. Now, scientists have found that under the right circumstances, a placebo can be just as effective as traditional treatments. Probably cheaper too. The placebo effect is more than positive thinking. Believing a treatment or procedure will work. It is about creating a stronger connection between the brain and body and how they work together. Now, they're seeing this from a scientific standpoint. The person who's experiencing the placebo effect, it's just, yep, I believe this is going to work. I think this is going to work. The doctors told me it's going to work. So in my mind, in their mind, it's working. It says, this was said by Dr. Ted Kapchuk of a Harvard affiliate Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, whose research focuses on the placebo effect. Placebos won't lower your cholesterol, he says, or shrink a tumor. Instead, placebos work on symptoms modulated by the brain, like the perception of pain. Placebos make you feel better, but they will not cure you, says Kapchuk. They have been shown to be most effective for conditions like pain management, stress-related insomnia, and cancer treatment side effects like fatigue and nausea. And it's interesting because we've actually seen some other studies, I don't have it here with me, where those placebo effects actually did bring about permanent changes in a person's physical body as well. You also could see that in regards to suggestive hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and things of that nature. All right, so let's look at the second paragraph there. It says, pessimism, on the other hand, is a negative character trait. A pessimistic person will always see what is wrong in a situation. He usually has a problem with almost everything and jumps to conclusions without getting all the facts. All right, and this is one of the very first character traits that we talk about in pretty much all the units here, is getting the facts, making sure they're correct, even getting the facts about how your negative way of thinking can affect you or impact not only your mind, your behavior, but your health as well. In fact, I want to back up a little bit. If we can play the video on optimism and the benefits of it.
Optimism is good for your health.
There's two different aspects that we need to talk about. One is the behavioral side of things. The other is the physiology that changes with the positive mindset.
Dr. Richa Sood says optimistic people's behavior often includes taking charge of their health.
They're going to read about what makes me healthy and maybe start eating healthy. They want to go to the gym and do their exercise and maintain their weight.
The physiological aspect of not being optimistic can be measured.
The association between pessimism and inflammatory markers in the body is very strong.
Inflammation increases your risk of heart disease and other issues. Pessimism also affects cell aging. You see, chromosomes are capped with what are called telomeres.
The longer the telomere, the younger the cell. So it's a marker of cell age. Chronic stress shortens the telomeres. Pessimism shortens the telomeres.
The good news is that if you work to be more optimistic, you may improve your overall health. For the Mayo Clinic News Network, I'm Vivian Williams.
All right, so there is some benefits to being optimistic, and even when you couple it even with setting your goals and being optimistic about the goals you set, like they just said there, you're more likely to achieve them. If you set goals and think you can't achieve them, then you're kind of kicking yourself in the shin there. So that it's not just the physical or not just the emotional aspect of things, but that optimism can actually affect us positively in our health as well. Pessimistic people, we'll go back to page 34 here. Pessimistic people are negative thinkers. Negative thinkers. According to the National Science Foundation, an average person has about 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. I won't ask you for a test next class to see if you can count every thought you have, because just the fact of you counting that would equal one at least. But think about that, 12,000, and William covered that, the decisions that we make. He covered decisions, but think about the thoughts that we have in our minds that aren't even require a decision. 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. Of those, 80% are negative for most people. 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. And of those, 80% are negative and 95% are repetitive thoughts. So it's not always new things that are coming into your mind. A lot of times we rehash things over and over and over and over again. Are they mad at me? Did I say something? Did I miss doing something? Was I supposed to do something yesterday? Man, I'm so stupid. Why can't I remember? And we rehash things over and over and over in our minds. So, 60,000 thoughts, 95% of them are repetitive thoughts. We kind of go over the same thing every day. They say, same thing, different day. All right. If we repeat those negative thoughts, we think negative way more than we think positive. So with that knowledge, and it takes a lot of effort at first. The first time you curled that, 200-pound dumbbell, right? Everybody? No? Okay. We'll start it at 5 then, 5 pounds. The first time you did that, it was hard. It was difficult, right? And you tried to keep a straight face and not look like you were straining and that your vein was about to pop out of your forehead. But you did it. You eventually did it. And over a period of time and repetition, it became easier and easier. Well, it's the same with being aware and mindful of our thoughts. It takes a lot of effort, and it can seem like it can be very overwhelming, not that you have to scrutinize every thought, but a lot of these things, they affect the way we feel. And so when we're recognizing certain things affect the way we feel, then we have to take a look at that thought, because we know that those feelings can eventually lead to actions if we don't bring those things under control. So it just adds a little bit more to our plate. But again, like I said, the more we repeat these things over and over, the easier they become. You know, the more repetitive they are in our lives, it becomes like an automatic response. In regards to negative thinking here, it says negative thinking can contribute to problems such as social anxiety, depression, stress, and low self-esteem. The key to changing your negative thoughts is to understand how you think. And this is interesting because this is the exact same thing the Peaceful Solution says. And this is from scientific research, you know, doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists, right? Psychologists and psychiatrists. And so it says the key to changing your negative thoughts is to understand how you think and the problems that result. Then use strategies, as we found here and as we've been presenting in the Peaceful Solution, to change these thoughts or make them have less of an effect. Our thoughts, they say, emotions and behaviors are all linked. Same thing we're learning here. Science is just backing it up. So our thoughts impact how we feel and act. So although we have unhelpful thoughts from time to time, it's important to know what to do when they appear so we don't let them change the course of the day. Our day, explains Rachel Goldman, PhD, a psychologist and clinical assistant professor at the NYU School of Medicine. All right, so let's back here to Peaceful Solution on page 34. It says, a pessimistic thinker has a tendency to feel badly about himself and the world around him. Pessimistic people are negative self-talkers and are more likely to find external ways to try to make themselves feel better. You know, and that's an important point that, you know, as teachers, we can point out to our students, because those risk-taking behaviors that we talked about, those are external ways that people use to make themselves, to try to make themselves feel better. It's like a person who gets depressed, and what do? They like to get drunk, or they like to, you know, smoke a little marijuana or do a little cocaine or whatever. And at the time, everything's peachy, right? They're not thinking about their problems. But what occurs when they come down off that high? Problems are still there. Now they're probably even worse because your alarm's blaring and you're about 2 hours late for work. And now you're going to be risking getting fired. You can't pay your bills. You're kicked out of your house. They repo your car. You know, so you see how these things can continue to spiral downward when we allow ourselves, just by not governing and being mindful and controlling our thoughts, which leads to our feelings, which leads to our actions, can put us in a worse situation than we were to begin with. Often these ways are negative and, you guessed it, risky. When interviewed, many people who have had drug and alcohol addictions reported feeling as if they had no reason to be thankful. They hated themselves and they could find no joy in the world around them. And as a result, they turned to illegal drugs, alcohol abuse, and premarital illegal sex as a way to solve their problems, because deep down they wanted a relief. Deep down they were searching for peace, but they didn't know where to find it. So they went to where society taught them to find those things: drugs, alcohol, illegal sex, and so forth. At the very bottom there it says, warning, warning, warning. Doing something that is morally wrong will never make you feel better about yourself or solve your problems. Negative thinking and negative self-talk lead to negative choices, and negative choices can destroy your life. Remember what we covered, in the character unit on accentuating the positive. Don't accentuate the negative. The negative's there. The problems are there. There's always going to be problems in life. But first we have to recognize what the problem is. Yes, we do. We can't ignore it and hope that it goes away. Oh, that's a $200 bill. Well, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the positive. The bill don't go away by you ignoring it, right? You acknowledge that it's there, and then you do what you need to do to work to eliminate it, right, or prevent it from occurring later on. Same thing with these negative thoughts or the problems that arise in our lives. We acknowledge that they're there, and then we have to take a look and say, well, what caused this? You know, what decisions did I make? What environment was I in, or whatever, that caused this to come about? Now, what are the steps that I need to take to fix it, get out of the situation, and to prevent it from occurring in the future? And that's what we have the ability to do with this thing up here called our mind, our brain. And if we use it to our advantage, to be a benefit to ourselves and others, we are also demonstrating what we're covering in this unit, which is self-respect. So we're going to stop on page 34, and David will pick up on page 35 in the next class under Think About It, or maybe go back and refresh a little bit. For your knowledge, the next class will be this upcoming Wednesday, 2/15/2003, 5:30 Central Standard Time. Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you later in the week. Have a wonderful evening.